Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and equip you with the essential insights you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a critical geopolitical choke point that's, once again, demanding global attention, the Strait of Hormuz. We've compiled a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive, ranging from breaking news reports to community intelligence discussions, all pointing to a significant and potentially volatile development regarding this vital waterway.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to really unpack these sources, help you understand the recent catalysts, explore the potential repercussions if the Strait of Hormuz faces, significant disruption, and ultimately grasp why this seemingly regional issue has such profound, far-reaching global implications, no matter where you are.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. For those who might not be intimately familiar, what exactly is the Strait of Hormuz and why is it so important? What makes it such an indispensable piece of the global puzzle?
Right. So the Strait of Hormuz is this narrow waterway connecting the Gulf of Oman with the Persian Gulf. Think of it as the world's most critical oil corridor, really a true choke point. Physically, at its narrowest point, it's just 20 miles wide.
20 miles? That's incredibly narrow when you think about the volume of traffic.
It really is. But what's even more critical for shipping are the deep water shipping lanes themselves. They're less than 2 miles wide in each direction. This extreme narrowness, it already makes it incredibly vulnerable.
That physical vulnerability really stands out. But you also mentioned its shallowness as a particular risk earlier. How does that factor in? What kinds of threats does that open up?
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction. Its relative shallowness makes it a particular target for, say, underwater mining. It's easier to deploy mines effectively. And its inherent narrowness means passing vessels are just very susceptible to attacks from a whole range of threats. You've got shore-based missiles, fast patrol boats, even helicopters.
Okay, so multiple points of vulnerability there.
Exactly. And when you consider its global significance, it's just staggering. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits through this strait.
20%. Wow.
Yeah. To give you a sense of the economic stakes, a sustained closure could block an estimated $1 billion in oil shipments per day.
$1 billion a day. That's immense.
It is. And it's the primary export route for all the regional oil giants like Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, which means, consequently, major Asian economies, China, India, Japan, South Korea, they're heavily reliant on it for most of their oil imports. China, for example, is the world's biggest buyer of Iranian oil.
Right. So the impact is truly global. Now, what's truly fascinating and perhaps most concerning right now is that this immediate crisis isn't happening in a vacuum, is it?
Yeah.
It's the direct fallout from some very significant military action. Can you lay out for us what happened just before this Iranian parliamentary vote? What was the trigger?
Absolutely. Our sources indicate that this recent Iranian parliamentary vote comes in direct response to a very specific and, frankly, impactful series of U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facility. The operation was apparently dubbed Midnight Hammer.
Midnight Hammer.
Yeah. On June 21st, 2025, the U.S. military reportedly dropped 6 15-ton GBU-57 bunker buster bombs on Iran's Fordo nuclear enrichment plant and 2 other key sites.
15-ton bombs. And these bunker busters, GBU-57s, you said? I understand these haven't been used in combat before.
That's what the sources say, yeah. It sends a very clear message about capability and, intent. These GBU-57s are massive ordnance penetrators, or MOP. They're specifically designed to penetrate deep underground hardened facilities like nuclear bunker before they detonate. So using them for the first time in combat,
right,
that's a significant escalation.
Definitely sounds like it. What else do we know about the scale of this operation?
Well, the operation reportedly involved 7 B-2 stealth bombers dropping 14 of these MOP bombs. A third site was apparently hit with Tomahawk submarine-launched cruise missiles. In total, something like 125 aircraft were involved, and they completed the whole thing in just 25 minutes.
That's incredibly fast for such a large operation.
It is, and it's also important context that prior to these U.S. airstrikes, Israel had already initiated quite extensive attacks on Iran's nuclear infrastructure and military targets. So tensions were already extremely high. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi quickly condemned the U.S. actions, calling them extremely dangerous, lawless, and criminal behavior.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Iran feels attacked, and then their parliament votes to close the strait. The immediate question for many listeners, I imagine, is the strait actually shut down right now, or is this more political signaling?
That's a really crucial distinction our sources highlight, and it's vital not to misunderstand it. Iran's parliament has indeed voted in support of closing the Strait of Hormuz. That's a powerful political step, no doubt. However, the sources explicitly state this vote is an advisory measure. Think of it like a non-binding resolution.
Advisory. Okay, so not an executive order to close it immediately.
Exactly. The actual final decision on retaliation or closure ultimately rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council and, crucially, its leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He has the ultimate authority. According to Iran's state-run press TV, that decision was expected by the evening of June 22nd, 25. So very recent.
So the parliament's vote is like a strong recommendation, a warning shot, maybe.
Yeah.
But Khamenei holds the final decision.
That's precisely the dynamic. And a Revolutionary Guards commander, Emil Kosari, was quoted saying the move will be done whenever necessary, which, highlights that strategic flexibility is key for them. They're keeping their options.
And this isn't exactly new territory for Iran, using the strait or shipping as leverage.
No, not at all. This isn't an entirely new playbook. We've seen similar tactics before. Our sources recall, for instance, the seizure of an Israel-linked container ship, the MSC Ares, just last April. And back in April 2023, there was the seizure of a U.S.-bound tanker.
Right, I remember that.
And in May 2022, they held 2 Greek tankers for 6 months. That was widely seen as direct retaliation for the confiscation of Iranian oil by Greece, acting on U.S. requests.
So there's a history of tit-for-tat actions involving shipping.
Definitely. And beyond naval actions, Iran has also explicitly threatened to strike U.S. bases in the region and even American, British, and French military bases if a broader military conflict were to erupt.
Okay, so the stakes are incredibly high. If this closure, or even just a significant disruption, does go ahead, what are the real-world consequences? Why should our listeners care? How does this affect their daily lives?
Oh, the implications are massive, and they hit close to home. It affects global economies and, yes, potentially your wallet very directly. First off, oil prices would spike almost immediately. That's pretty much a given.
Right. Less supply, higher prices. Standard economics.
Exactly. But any sustained closure could trigger serious inflation shocks worldwide, particularly for countries heavily reliant on imported oil. And this wouldn't just be about gas prices at the pump, it ripples through global supply chain. Think about the cost of transporting everything. It goes up.
So goods on shelves could get more expensive.
Potentially, yes. And even just the threat of disruption could grind shipping to a halt. Shipping companies simply won't risk multi-million-dollar vessels and their crews in what could become a conflict zone. They won't want to rely on insurance that might not even pay out under such circumstances.
That's a good point about insurance.
Yeah, some sources suggest maritime insurance companies might start canceling policies altogether for that route, or making premiums prohibitively expensive. That makes transit virtually impossible without immense risk or, extremely costly armed escorts provided by navies.
So the ripple effect goes way beyond just oil, impacting trade globally if shipping companies pull back. It really highlights how interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. And there's also speculation in our sources that Iran might not even aim for a complete physical closure. That might be too difficult or provoke too strong a response. They could instead try to selectively target, say, non-Western flagged vessels, or maybe ships bound for certain destinations they want to pressure.
So a more targeted disruption.
Right, aiming to cause maximum disruption and economic pain, perhaps, without necessarily inviting the full-scale military might of every major power at once.
That brings us to the military side. If Iran does attempt to close or seriously disrupt the strait, what would be the likely military response from the U.S. and its allies? And crucially, how effective could Iran actually be against that kind of?
Well, the U.S. and its allies have a long-standing, very clear policy. Any attempt to block the Strait of Hormuz is a red line. They've maintained a strong naval presence in the region for decades, specifically to keep it open. The U.S. Navy's primary mission, in large part, includes enforcing and securing these vital ships.
So a strong reaction is expected.
Yes, the consensus among analysts seems to be that the U.S. and its allies would respond quickly and decisively. This could potentially lead to sunk Iranian ships, strikes on any anti-ship missile sites Iran might have along the coast. A broad coalition force might even be put together similar to past operations to ensure the strait remains open.
But there's always this debate, isn't there, about Iran's actual capability. Can they really sustain a closure against that kind of overwhelming military power? Some sources seem skeptical.
That's where the crucial nuance lies, and it's a really interesting debate in the sources. While some argue Iran is militarily, let's say, neutered in a conventional sense and cannot effectively close the strait against the U.S. Navy, others strongly contend that Iran doesn't need to make it physically impassable 24/7.
What do they mean by that?
Their strategy could be simpler. Just make travel through the strait extremely dangerous.
Right.
By using mines, maybe random missile strikes, suicide drones, enough to make shipping companies and insurers say, nope, not with the risk.
Disruption over total closure.
Precisely. As some sources put it, enough random missiles and mines is all it will take to grind shipping to a halt. Or One tanker sunk or seriously damaged sends the message, loud and clear.
That's a powerful point. It reframes the whole thing. Iran doesn't need to win a naval battle. They just need to make the economic risk of passage unbearably high. It shifts the goal from military dominance to maybe economic paralysis, which might be more achievable.
Exactly. And you have to consider the drone factor into it. Sources suggest Iran, having clearly demonstrated the capabilities of drones, could potentially disrupt transit with, quote, almost nothing except political will. Drones are cheap, effective, and deniable to some extent.
And we've seen a parallel elsewhere recently, haven't we?
We have. A stark comparison is drawn in the sources to the Houthi militia's disruption of traffic through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait down near Yemen. Using a combination of relatively inexpensive missiles and drones, they managed to cut ship traffic through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden by a staggering 70% last June.
70%. Just with missiles and drones.
Yeah, it forced countless vessels to reroute all the way around Africa. That makes journeys vastly more expensive and significantly longer. That's the kind of economic leverage effective disruption can create, even without achieving full military control of the waterway.
It really underscores that this isn't just about oil flow or shipping lanes in isolation. It's a global flashpoint with much wider geopolitical ramifications that could spiral very quickly. What's the bigger picture here regarding the potential for escalation?
Well, this situation is certainly ripe with potential for rapid escalation. Many sources we looked at suggest this could easily move beyond targeted strikes and evolve into a, quote, full-blown war.
A full-blown war?
Yes. There's a deep concern about the cycle of action and reaction. Actions lead to counteractions, creating a dangerous and unpredictable spiral. Some comments in our sources even pose the question, was the red line passed when the U.S. bombed Iran? Implying that from some perspectives, the initial major escalation already happened, so all bets are off regarding Iran's response.
So in some views, the U.S. strikes themselves might be seen as crossing a threshold, potentially justifying a much broader retaliation from Iran's perspective.
That is indeed one significant viewpoint actively discussed in the intelligence communities and sources. Yes. There's also a broader debate tangled up in this about whether the ultimate goal of military intervention might be regime change in Iran. And the immense challenges associated with that kind of goal are also discussed, with some analysts arguing it would fundamentally require boots on the ground, not just aerial bombings, which carries huge risks.
And internationally, how is this being viewed? Is it just posturing or something more?
It's complex. From an international perspective, the situation can be interpreted in various ways. Is it posturing by Iran in response to regional events, a reaction to internal political pressure, part of ongoing behind-the-scenes negotiations? Our sources reflect a really wide range of viewpoints. You have those who genuinely believe Iran feels it's under an existential attack, all the way to those who argue that neither the U.S. nor Israel truly desires to, eliminate the civilian government entirely, focusing more on curbing its nuclear and military capabilities.
And the narratives around it.
Right. And of course, there are discussions, inevitably, on how different political narratives might strategically spin the economic impacts of such a crisis, depending on their own agenda and who they want to blame.
So this deep dive into the Strait of Hormuz reveals a truly complex interplay, doesn't it? Geography, economics, military strategy, raw political will. It's all mixed together. The situation remains incredibly fluid. The parliament's vote signals clear intent, maybe anger, but that final high-stakes decision rests firmly with Iran's top leadership.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating, and maybe a bit terrifying, is how this narrow strip of water, just a few miles wide for active shipping, can hold such immense sway over global stability, the entire world economy, potential for international conflict. The varying assessments of Iran's actual capabilities, from simple, economically crippling disruption all the way to an attempted full closure versus the unwavering resolve of international forces keep it open. It just underscores the immense stakes involved. For everyone, everywhere.
It really does. And as you reflect on everything we've discussed, maybe consider this. In a world that prides itself on increasing interconnectedness, on building resilient systems, how do localized choke points like the Strait of Hormuz continue to exert such disproportionate, almost outsized influence on global affairs? And what does that tell us about the hidden vulnerabilities, the fragile points still lurking within our intricate global system?